Welcome to Margin Makers, where we help CEOs, CROs, and CFOs understand where future margin is going to come from. And believe it or not, it's going to come from places you may not believe or see today, that being your sales function. And when we do that, Dave, we kind of expose some of the vulnerabilities and some of the inefficiencies and the misalignments that happen that are occurring right under our noses, and we're not really aware of them. So today we're going to talk something I think is really, really cool, Dave, is kind of your idea around this misalignment of organizations, not just externally, but internally. So Dave, welcome. Look forward to our second podcast together. So what's on your mind and what got you thinking about alignment?
Well, thanks, Brian. Great to be here again. And we're excited to share insights with, again, our audience, CEOs and CFOs, to really try to reveal some of the things that we see all the time that they may not be aware of, to better improve commercial performance. And, last time in episode 1, we talked quite a bit about, some of the challenges that we see that the teams have, and that the focus on margin in the future because of the commoditization of product selling is going to erode margin in sort of that transactional area, really focus on these bigger strategic sales and needs. And the concept of alignment, so often we talk about system of sales, how's the sales system? But to me, it's really, we need to shift the orientation of business executives to a system of what I call alignment. Mm-hmm. And aligning to what? Well, aligning to customers. So, we live in a world that's historically been product driven, but we really need to be value driven. And that's why customers are buying. And we know, Brian, from all of the current events that are happening in the last 6 months, in particular, this acceleration of AI, but buyers are disengaging with sales, moving on their own. And what they're interested in driving is outcomes, right? So
yeah, I don't see why in the near future you want to talk to 3 salespeople when you already kind of have a good idea of what you're looking for, and AI can actually help you select the ideal choices and answer questions for you. I think that this product selling approach you're talking about, I think, just takes the human seller out of the equation altogether. And I want to come back to one thing as we move forward here, and that is the sales function has to be your margin creator moving forward. And the problem is today, when sellers are showing up too low, too late from that product centricity you're talking about, they're giving you so little margin to work with. So we think about where the origin of margin is going to come from: when, where, and how we enter the sale, which is a case for your idea of around alignment. Because right now, from a product-centric approach, you're just too low, too late. AI's going to take over, and I think you're going to see a further compression of margin from that perspective, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've got a system where we sort of, we're telling the salespeople to hit quotas, to focus on leads, and to sell products, and they're really not aligned to customers' outcomes, focused on their needs and the value that your company can drive for the customer. Mm-hmm. And so the organization itself is in the way, I think, is the point. It's not just the sales function, but the organization is set up to reinforce a selling function that is product quota driven and really not oriented towards the customer. And I would say that there's some things that are good in the alignment of the org for sales. Vertical alignment is good because you're getting closer. Yep. Right? You start to then have target account identification is good. But I see a lot of companies stop there, and then they apply the same bad sales model in a vertical industry tied to target accounts, but they're not aligning to the target accounts, the capabilities of the organization to get the yield out of the sales function at the potential level that they could. It's very sub-optimized.
So I came into this conversation, Dave, thinking about alignment to the prospect. I think what you're hinting at is there's some misalignment internally even. So I think we've got a misalignment map here that we should think about. So do you want to kind of start with some of the internal misalignments you've seen, and let's what the price you're going to pay for that?
Yeah, I've seen, so as you know, and Brian, I'm always fascinated by this because our client base and a lot of the conversations I have, 80% of CROs have been replaced in the last, year. It seems like there's a huge reorganization of people. There's a recasting of what the target accounts are. We see people focused on the organization, right? And then like redoing compensation plans. But that never, it's kind of like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, right? It
So the
doesn't.
CRO is the new CMO because weren't CMOs dealt with a high velocity?
Yeah, and right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's almost like in the CMOs, they don't even really hear about.
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating. So they realign the org into these groups and even target accounts, but then it sort of stops.
Mm.
And this is where the obstacles that are in the way of the selling. Think of your sales team as facing, if you're a CFO, a CEO or CFO, a huge obstacle course, right? So for them to go sell your capabilities and unlock your value
Mm-hmm.
with your skill sets and know-how, they have to run around and piece together all of the different disparate parts of capabilities you have that are trapped inside of these different product silos and try to bring it to the customer in a way that makes sense to the customer. And that's why they don't use a lot of the marketing material. I mean, organizations need to focus on getting obstacles out of the way is kind of one of the first priorities I see. So I have a story, for example, one client, because they were so focused on controlling the allocation of resources, put in place a process where they created a ticketing system so that the sellers had to request a resource by submitting a ticket for one. But the response time of the internal resource managers, they gave themselves 4 weeks to even determine and provide an answer to the seller that a resource would be available or would be made available, let alone who the resource was.
So you're right. I think this is under the radar screen. Where this does show up, that would matter to a CFO or CEO is a flattening of their margin, right? We're not growing the margin the way we are supposed to or should or have made commitments to. But I don't think they first look at the sales function and its inefficiencies or the misdesign, ill design
Right.
of the selling structure, right? And you think about, can I add something to this? Because this is interesting to me because when you think about the world accelerating, and we talked last time about this race to the bottom. The race to the bottom is where everybody's showing up, they all can do the work, everybody's capable, competent, and it comes down to price, right? When it comes down to price, when you're being compared, Dave, that means your margin is gone. And that's where most human sellers show up today. So you've got this broken system you're referring to, and this positioning of where they're showing up too low, too late. You've got real margin problems. Now, this idea of waiting 4 weeks to be ticketed, to be reviewed, to even make the call, let's think about a well-positioned, modern design sales function. Knowing that the world's moving faster, and the only way I can counter this race to the bottom, Dave, is with that sprint to the summit. I want to be in first at the highest level. Do you think this organization, where it takes 4 weeks to get a determinant of whether they're going to even look at the case or not, I feel like a judge or a case, that the competitor's not going to sweep in and get all the margin, get all the business?
Well, that's exactly what's happening. That's exactly what's happening and they don't even know it's happening at the highest levels because it's happening, without their knowledge because it's not popping up in the CRM system. The client is trying to solve something significant. If you're a CEO, you're trying to unlock the value of your company, and you really are in the business of aligning all the things that you've acquired, bought, created, built, and all the resources you have to give that client these great solutions. And that's what I see not happening because the companies aren't aligning themselves to be able to put that playbook in the hands of a seller at the moment of need that the customer has. And if you can't do that in 24 to 48 hours, you're in trouble because that's what AI is enabling the market leaders to do.
Right. That sprint to the summit, there's room for one. This is a zero-sum game we're playing.
Yeah.
Right. So I think what you're referring to is that your competitor who has that pre-intel, who sees what's going on, that's adaptable, right, fluid and flexible, they're in there, right, and therefore this company is waiting for. They're never even in the equation.
Right.
What's interesting to me is when you think about where sellers are showing up today. 80% of the buying journey is already done. Only 5 to 10% of organizations are even at that moment. So what we have are all these sellers competing for such a little portion of the business. And I think what you're talking about, Dave, is there's a whole nother 85 to 90% or 95% of opportunities that aren't even being discussed or on a seller's radar screen or an organization's radar screen that you can uncover and actually start those journeys much earlier, higher level, which is where your margins are going to come from. Is that kind of on? Is that tracking with what you're thinking?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the opportunity that exists today, where the margin is, right, is solving higher level customer needs that are urgent and timely.
Yep.
You need a fast response team to do that. Your sales team is not set up to be a fast response team. Usually the seller's left on their own and they got to come back into the supply chain and try to get the things that they need, but no one's really helping them quickly react. And I would say alignment first to the need, but also you have to be adaptive to your point. You have to be flexible. You have to be able to piece together and innovate and co-create and react to the customer's stated requirements and needs. And a lot of companies have the capabilities and skills. It's like, I know you got the capabilities, but you can't bring it to me in a coordinated way. And that's why I'm not buying from you. I'm going to buy from these guys because it's a lot easier. They show up with,
Well, they were there. They were there early. I
they're
think
early and they're talking, like they can solve my problem, and you're not. So
yeah, I don't even
it's
think
over.
you're not even part of shopping then, right? Because I think that the 5 to 10% where everybody's banging it out and lowering their price, which means giving away all your value and
Right.
margin. I think what you're saying is there's a hunting opportunity here for aligned organizations, not just aligned internally, but aligned externally to their prospects' real priorities and threats. I'm talking real decision makers, right?
Yeah.
So your idea of what you can do from a pre-intel perspective, we can surface some of these real challenges, and then you can match make that quickly and be the first one in, right? The first one in at a high level is the only one they really consider. And I think that's a real missed opportunity for those who are still living with a previously designed sales organization that's just not vital or not relevant anymore.
Yeah, I also see the executive buyers, right, is now more complicated. Like the buying decisions are occurring at higher levels.
Mm-hmm.
There's more people involved, and they expect relevant, timely, insight-driven information while they're funding an initiative. And the bigger the company, the bigger the amount of money they tend to spend on virtually anything. And that's what I see is companies are not, CEOs and CFOs don't know that they really need to redesign the system because
That's
the money
it.
and margins up here, and
Yeah.
the system is currently focused way down here. And yeah, you can make it more efficient with AI, but that's not solving your margin problem.
Man, that is a if you see the pained look on my face, it's all coming together here, right? If the margin is made earlier at a higher level before a buying journey is even started, yet as a CEO, I'm investing millions and millions of dollars in a sales structure that's clunky, that takes 4 weeks to get someone to even on the team, that has my sellers showing up too low, too late, and we're rewarding them for revenue, not margin. I feel like it's that game of musical chairs, but we're not taking one chair away every time the music stops. I think we're taking every chair but one away, right?
Right.
Instantly. And I think that's what's going to strike so many companies because AI can do the work of that 4 week wait time. AI can improve your seller's capacity, but if they don't have the capability through misdesign, misalignment to be able to hunt at that high level, I think you're just wasting your money, aren't you? Is all this investment in sales salaries and expenses and commissions and
Yeah,
$100,000
I
a
think
year per person?
I see the best teams are, it's really a cross-functional team. Think of it like a front office team that's a blend of skills, and there's a lot of money there. I mean, what I see is the current state is everybody screaming at the salesperson that they're not making their quota and they're just going to replace them, but they haven't fixed the system the person's
Well,
in.
and that's a revenue quota, not even a margin quota.
Right, exactly. We talk about blue space versus white space, right? Every sales organization has this white space concept. How much of my products did I sell into this target account? That's yesteryear.
Mm-hmm.
Current state is how many needs can I solve of my customer, and how do I align playbooks to solve those kinds of needs so I can react quickly in the moment that they occur, and I can inventory those and work backwards from customer. That's why we talk about go to customer versus go to market. It's fundamentally CEOs and CFOs have to orient themselves around what does the customer want? How does my company get it to them? And how do I align my capabilities and playbooks to match with a team that's competent and perceived as, very well versed in the customer's world, with senior executive buyers. That's what CEOs and CFOs have to put in place, and it has to start with them, because unless they advocate that, the obstacles remain.
And hopefully the language we're bringing to the equation here is it's all about margin creation or margin compression, and that your sales function is what's responsible for how much margin you have to work with.
Yep.
Hopefully that gets their attention. You said something interesting, Dave. Go to customer, not go to market. I see this as well. And let's talk about alignment in another perspective. You want your sellers to get that earlier access from a playbook level. How do they get a meeting with someone who's not actively shopping? Because aren't you talking about getting in before they're actively seeking a solution?
Yes, absolutely.
Once they start, once I've identified we need to do something and this is the direction we're going to take, then it's off to the race to the bottom, right? The race to the bottom. I'll talk to 3 companies, we'll bring them in, and then all of a sudden your margin erosion kicks in hyperdrive. So you're talking about getting access earlier to higher level before a buying journey has started.
Exactly. We talked last time about this concept of pre-intent signals, but unless you bring those to the account sellers, they don't know what they are. How are they going to read through all of the press and all the reports and information and identify, unmet needs and challenges a client has, package up an insight and bring it to them over and over and over again every day across multiple accounts?
Absolutely. You're right. But what if, as an organization, we understood what our real impact is?
Yeah.
We understood exactly where we add value, and those who believe and see that on the other side of the table are the ones that are going to pay us the most for what it is we do. That's a pretty simple. It's pretty simple business. So if I understand my real impact and what you're saying, because I think this unlocks some of the challenges you've seen, right, where you bring a lot of pre-intent signals to an organization. Yeah. But if I don't know how to have a conversation unless someone has a specific product in mind, I'm going to struggle.
Exactly.
So if we can align around what it is we really, really can do for an organization, and then we mix that with your pre-intent signals, then we can have the instant conversation. There's no struggling, there's no waffling. We just can activate and go, right?
Exactly. You're just looking for the signals that you can seize the moment with, because you've already figured out how to bring the most value with the right insights and construct, and frame it in a way that's, very meaningful to the customer. But that will work all day, every day.
But our primitive brains are designed to eliminate threats both physically and socially. A social threat, we know, is a fear of missing out, fear of loss, risk avoidance, and these things. So to make a priority is nothing more than a commitment to make a threat go away. And a threat has to be, to your point, important and urgent.
Yes. That's what should be in the pipeline. I think what I'm saying is, if you're a CEO, go look at your pipeline, and you're going to see a whole bunch of product sales that have probably been there for, 9 months that haven't moved hardly at all. Why? Because no one's going to buy that. No one's going to buy what's in your pipeline. But if you upgrade your pipeline to put these in at the top, and you have, how many of these can you find across all the different verticals? You're going to have bigger deals in your pipeline that are actually going to move through the sales process much faster.
Yeah.
They'll be larger. So fill up your pipelines with that high value stuff first, not last.
No, I think that's right. Can I talk for just a second about the investments? And we talked about alignment. I think this idea of designing a sales function or revenue function for the future, one that's focused on margin creation, not revenue, right? One of the things that I see chronic is that we overinvest in sellers who are just unprepared, ill-equipped, and underdeveloped. They just can't execute this concept you're talking about. It's not a complicated concept. They're just not, the structures aren't there, the rewards aren't there, and the people aren't prepared to do that. What price do you pay?
Right. Absolutely.
So when you think about the design of sales functions today and how it needs to change to adapt in the future, I think what's happening is that we're still building out sales organizations and working as if we're 20 years ago. And that's why this territory, and you have the quotas on revenue and those type of things, and they're completely missing where the future lies. And I think that this paradigm paralysis is where we tend to stay connected to things that used to work for us, even though they don't work anymore.
Yeah, I think that the motion's a little different. What you have
Hmm.
to do is embrace that it's not all about just the seller. And you're right, the seller is the tip of the spear, but there's a blended team of expertise that your company has inside that the buyer really wants to tap into. What does an executive buyer want when they make a purchase of a very large deal confidently? They got to know that you can deliver, that you have the capabilities, that those match to their needs,
Hmm.
that they want to see schematics and roadmaps and checklists, that you've got the skills on the team that can make sure it happens. So, like if you were hiring a
Well,
contractor to redesign your house,
yep.
right, you would want to see that they've done this before, that they've got this aligned. So, I think organizations put way too much on the seller and expect like that magically somehow then they'll just sell a big deal and we
Well,
don't have to worry about the
think
rest.
about the paradigm of how selling is done. If the prospect knows what they're looking for, right, and
Yeah.
they're well into their buying journey, maybe the thought is we don't need much more than a salesperson
Well,
because
that's true because that's
the
commodities.
schematic's already done and the thought's been done by someone else, right? Some of the inside tracks done all this work, and then you're just lowering your price to win work. This is what the big difference is. So many sellers are responding to existing demand. There's no margin left with existing demand. We're talking about creating demand for you and your
Absolutely.
organization. And to your point, then you just match that with the signals you create or the signals you pick up
Yeah.
to create that match, that alignment again. And what I found is when you align at that level, it's no longer your sale, it's their purchase. And I want to get rid of these words like closing and objection handling because that is too low, too late, and it's a sign of misalignment. But if you show up at the right time, understanding your real impact and what threats your prospect is facing, why would they push back at that?
No, they would be grateful that you're there
How
because
about
they have
that?
a
How about
problem
that? How
and you
about that?
showed up like a firefighter to a fire. It definitely works. I've seen it over and over again. And the great news for CEOs and CFOs is that you can rely on that pipeline to close. And it's going to be bigger deals. And the customer is going to be delighted that you showed up with the capabilities to help them in that moment. You just have to redo your system to
Yep.
maximize and pull that through versus this continued push of piece part capabilities that people really aren't in the business of tapping into sales for anymore.
Bigger deals. Can I add better margin? Bigger deals,
Yeah,
better margin, faster to implement, right? So
exactly. Well,
the, what,
bigger deals have bigger margin because of the very nature of there's more dollars
okay, but let's say
with
margin percentage. So let's say that we're more margin dollars, but greater margin percentage dollars
yes,
because the
yeah,
value is appreciated.
agreed. Yes,
Yeah.
they go hand in hand. And I also want to point out, I think the client's outcome and your margin should be aligned.
Ah, all right, how about alignment?
You bring
Yeah.
a big outcome to a client, well, your margin should be well intact, exactly where you want it to be or greater, and defined as part of that playbook because the outcome's so great for the client. They're not going to care about the margin that you make. They're going to be grateful that they got the outcome they wanted. And that's what they're buying.
Big insight right there, my friend. Not from a product selling perspective, right? That you don't see that when you're low and late with everybody else. So this idea of margin being a percentage and a number, I understand that. But I think that from a selling perspective, how relevant you are to them, how vital you are to them, and how valuable you are is really is what allows your margin to continue to grow. To your exact point.
Exactly. I've learned the hard way. Buyers aren't logical only. So you have this big ROI and you're like, why aren't they buying immediately? Well, because there's so much more to the buying mentality. It's an emotional buy. They have to have multiple stakeholders have a piece of this. So there's always going to be, what is their desired outcome? And a lot of it can be personal. I want to have achieved a win here. This helps me get
Absolutely.
to
It's
another
what
place.
your
There's a lot of
priority is. The thing about ROI is actually a very rational concept, and everybody has an ROI. That's why I don't like solution selling. If you're selling a solution, everything's a solution. So which solution am I going to buy? Of the
it's purely
17
logical. It doesn't take into account these other
motivating factors,
right, exactly.
right? It's what we
And
will do.
yeah, so I think that is a great additional topic. But again, for CEOs and CFOs, you have to be thinking about, you have to come in and reorient the organization a bit to say, we really need to focus on unlocking our value, for customers more easily, more quickly. We need to realign, get rid of processes that are in the way. We have to embrace AI can bring efficiency, but if I have bad processes that stop it in its tracks, what have you accomplished? Nothing. So you have to
Yes.
think of the whole workflow and design towards these higher value, higher margin opportunities.
Yeah, and let's talk one last thing about faster as well. The idea of earlier in the journey, people think that makes for a longer sales cycle. It actually doesn't, because when you're working with a decision maker and you're helping her address her real threats, do you think they futz and putz around, or do you think they get down to business and align their team and move forward? So you actually will shorten your sales cycle. The days of saying we have a long sales cycle as like a badge of honor, I think those days are long gone.
When you walk in the door at the time that they're in the moment of need,
Yes.
and you will be the priority sale. You will be the first one in. You'll be the only one that gets the lion's share of that pie on a funded initiative that they're spending money on. They don't have budgets for your products. They don't put in their budget, oh, I'm going to buy these products from so and so company. They put in their budget that they have money for systems and management and lots of things around functions, and that's where they spend money, and you got to fit into that.
Yep.
But your system is not set up for that now. It's not aligned to the customer's world, and you got to get the obstacles out of the way, then align, people and playbooks to those needs. Look for the signals that you're good at and start populating your pipelines with high value opportunities fast.
Yeah, I think that's as good as close we're going to get, my friend. And the good news, I guess, is that this is kind of an awakening. People are just coming to this realization. The challenge is it's a zero-sum game, right? If you don't and your competitor does, I think about that when your solution as an example, Dave, this idea of pre-intent signals. I can imagine someone going, that'd be kind of interesting, but can you imagine if your direct competitor received all those pre-intent signals and they were aligned to act faster, what that would mean to us? I can't imagine us sitting on our hands saying, let's let our competitor implement that. So I know we've covered a lot today around alignment. I'm sure we could spend some more time. Hit us up if you have any questions. We'd like to take some viewer, listener questions around alignment. Next time we have plenty to talk about. We've got to talk about what is a misdesigned organization look like, how to start taking steps to do that,
Right.
And what is an outcome. So how can we start taking this path together? So stay tuned, stay plugged in. I think this could be the exact resource that leadership needs to start converting their revenue function into actually margin creation.
All right. Great session, Brian.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And we look forward to seeing you all soon on the Margin Makers.